So I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to leave like 10 minutes or so at the end for your questions. So if you have some, collect them, and I think somebody will tell you where to stand to ask them. So this is mainly about Don's book, which I've read, obviously. And it's a very open and honest book about religion, politics, race, and journalism. So I want to start, unsurprisingly, with a question about journalism. So this is a quote from the book. "Preaching to the choir is not cutting it anymore. In the looming election cycle of 2024, democracy itself would depend on the willingness of a polarized people to exit our individual bubbles and talk to folks who've been watching a whole different movie." Are we doing enough of that, journalists?
No.
Talk to me.
And I don't mean that in a way to normalize craziness and to give false equivalency. But before the election, I wrote this book before the election, but during the election, I kept the promise to myself to do that. And I went around, they invited me to the Democratic convention. Republicans didn't invite me to their convention, but the Democrats invited me to their convention. And I said yes, but I don't want to just fly to Chicago. I want to go talk to people. So between New York and Illinois, I went to whatever, a swing state or a battleground state, and I just started talking to people. Didn't ask them what party they were part of. And I got a pulse of the election almost immediately. There was a lot of Trump out there. And I started getting calls from, not necessarily campaign folks, but from Democrats saying, "What are you doing? Are you curating this stuff?" I said, "No, I'm not curating it. I'm just going up to people and doing what I do as a journalist." And I say, "What is on your mind? What about this? What do you think of this?" And so I was disappointed at the outcome of the election, but I was not surprised. So I don't think we're doing enough of that, and I don't think we're doing enough of listening, but also challenging each other in a respectful way, as I see my friend Eddie Glaude does every day whenever I see him on the MSNBC and other places.
So what did you hear that made you so certain? This was different from 2016, where
I called 2016. This one I wasn't quite sure.
did?
I just knew that there was a possibility.
Yeah.
A very strong possibility. But 2016, I was like, he's going to win. And you know how?
Why did you think that in 2016?
I'm glad you're here.
Because I didn't.
Because you're
didn't.
part of. No, you're part of the reason, but it's not a bad thing. But so we would have at CNN the sort of editorial meeting, off-the-record editorial meetings with the campaigns. They would come in and they would speak to us. And I won't go into specifics, but the difference between the Trump and the Clinton campaigns were, it was oceans apart. The Clinton folks had no idea what we were saying on television. And when the Trump folks came in, I would say, I would like an interview with such, and they're like, "No, why would we give you an interview? We heard what you said about blah, blah, blah." Like they knew every single thing that was going on in the zeitgeist, and they weren't afraid to point it out and tell you about it. In the meantime, the Clinton people were like, why don't we just let our opponent, destroy himself or whatever, and they had no idea. They were a little bit too above it all. And that's not a criticism of Hillary Clinton. It's the people who are running her campaign. The same thing, I have huge criticism for the people who are running Kamala Harris's campaign, but not necessarily her. So the reason I knew was, one, there was this sort of whisper thing where people would see me and go, "You know what, I kind of like him." They'd see me in the elevator, I just hate to say it, I kind of like him, And then I would open up the paper, I would get my papers on Sunday, I would get the New York Times, the Washington Post, and whatever. And so Donald Trump would be on the front page, he'd be on the real estate section, he'd be in the entertainment section, he would be on the editorial section, and he dominated the media and the news cycle. And I said, this guy's going to win, because he's a master at doing that. And I think we didn't understand it then as much as we do now, but we're in an age where you have to, especially with social media, you have got to dominate every single, at least be present for every single facet, if you want to call it, of media. And you also can't be above it all. You can't pick and choose every single interview. I would say, call the Trump folks and ask them he'll do an interview. Sure, he said he'll call in at 10 whatever, but he'll be at a benefit, and he would call in. And then you ask some folks, like, can you get, no, we're going to do we're going to do 60 Minutes, or we're going to do a morning show, and why would we do your show? I'm like, okay. And you saw what happened.
Do you think, do you think we have a handle yet? I don't, but maybe you do.
That's not to say the other side wasn't lying. Don't get me wrong. I knew what it was, but yeah, go on, sorry.
Do you have a handle yet, or a thought about how the country made this? And don't worry, I'm not going to just ask you about politics. I want to talk about religion. But do you have a handle on how the country made this remarkable swing from Barack Obama to Donald Trump? Do you have a thought about what forces pushed that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Look, there's, and understandably so, I'm not going to pull any punches. There's a lot of racism out there. And whether it is racism in the sense that I don't like black people, there is that. But there's also a sense of fear, and that people are afraid of losing their position in society and in the world. And I can understand that fear. And so they react in ways that may not be rational, or they believe that's acting in their own interest. And so, you know, I believe it comes from racism. I think that we've also moved to a point between 2016 and 2024 where men feel that they are really losing their place in society to women.
Men, black and white, or mostly white?
Black and white, but mostly white men, mostly white men of all demographics. And now, you know, the younger guys are coming in or being sort of, you know, indoctrinated through social media and through digital media and podcasts and that sort of thing. And so people are afraid of losing their place in society. I can understand it. I don't agree with it, but I can analyze it as someone who, you know, as a journalist. And I think also people just want to live. And whether they just want to live enough where they can say the N-word or, you know, say what they, you know, horrible misogynistic things about women, or they just don't want to be judged or canceled or, you know, have their livelihoods taken away from them because they said one bad thing or they did one thing that people misinterpreted, or they make one mistake in life, because America is not supposed to be about killing people for making a mistake. It's about reciprocity, and I think people want that. So I think that whether that is a shift to the right doesn't kill their people. They embrace their people. Look at who we have in government now, and look at where's Al Franken.
Do a beat on that. Why does, you mean when you say the right doesn't kill their people, but the left do another beat?
Well, the left kill their people. The left, I mean, they get rid of Al Franken. They get rid of, and I write about that in the book, when they get rid of their strongest, most adamant and positive voices for, you know, one infraction or two infractions or three or whatever. Just there are no perfect people. And the sort of virtue signaling and sense of perfection that the left has is unattainable for almost anyone. And that I believe that sort of, you know, striving for perfection, it makes the people who are in politics, their leaders, boring, unrelatable, unapproachable. When they're on television, they look like they're giving a PowerPoint presentation instead of just talking. And so, yeah, I
so
think,
why?
So the
why do you
right
think
embraces their people. I mean, look, Donald Trump fought for Matt Gaetz until they said, when you see this congressional report, you're not going to want to fight for this guy. There is no way in West hell that Pete Hegseth should be the defense secretary. He is not qualified. He's not qualified. I think he has more babies, mamas than anybody. And, you know, pretends to be this, you know, upstanding Christian by the Bible. And he's like, you know, cheating on wives or whatever. But they embrace their people. They realize Pete Hegseth is good for recruitment because the guys who want to be in the military are kind of like him. And so we need to support him for that. And then other stuff we don't give a crap about. I'm not saying it's right, but that's where we are right now. It's the same thing. I mean, do you think that, why is J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, the man who compared Donald Trump to Hitler at one point, and he realized that he needed him because they needed that sort of hillbilly elegy quality that he brings. And I think Democrats need to take a page from that. Even with this current controversy that's happening with Signalgate, they're circling the wagons. They're circling the wagons on streaming, on podcasts, on radio, conservative podcasts, conservative streaming, conservative television, the Daily Mail, the New York Post. Well, the New York Post did kind of make fun of it. But everyone is circling the wagons and protecting, hey, look, aren't you happy that our leaders are so transparent and they're not afraid of making mistakes? And Jeffrey Goldberg should have exited himself from the conversation. He is really the story. And they're all saying the same thing. The mission was successful. They're all on point.
Do you think it'll work?
Yes.
Why do you think it works?
Okay, I think the two things. I'm of two minds about this. I think this one is sticky because it's so easy. This one is easy. It's not complicated. This is like, build a wall or whatever, make America great again. This is easy to comprehend. They're on a text messaging encrypted system that they shouldn't be on, especially talking about the things that they're talking about. The text messages are there to read. And it's not funny, but it's laughable. There's stupidity in this. And I believe, like Watergate, the cover-up is worse than the crime. But the difference is, the reason I think that it'll work is because Donald Trump has control of the media. There is no legislative branch anymore. The legislative branch is now part of the executive branch. And the judicial branch is almost part of the executive branch as well. So I think it could work. All he has to do is, he said it, I'm cool with this guy, no one did wrong, and we're moving on. And if anybody gets in trouble for something on a federal level, he's just going to exonerate them or pardon them. So what are you going to do?
I want to talk about religion for a bit, and then I'll come back to politics. And especially people here will, but I want to honor the book, because the book really is about religion. So it shouldn't be, but it's startling to see a journalist talk about religion. So I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
I was even an altar boy. But I remember being taken aback the first time one of my deputies walked into a meeting with ashes on her forehead. And I thought, I'm just not used, in New York City, I'm just not used to seeing an open display of religion. But you talk very honestly about religion, but you also acknowledge that for a period of your life, as you say, you played it safe and guarded your faith and didn't talk about it. Will you talk about the journey from not wanting to talk about religion to writing a book about religion?
Well, it was also not really wanting to embrace religion after, coming out and being told that after becoming an adult, right, and understanding what the world was like. And so I didn't really want to embrace it, but it's in my blood. I mean, I grew up right up the street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I went to a Catholic school, but I was a Baptist. There was a lot of religion in my life.
So I'm not going to touch the Baptist Catholic.
Oh my gosh! So here's
Sorry.
who here is familiar with we call them parochial schools here, Catholic schools? Okay. One, honestly, it's so ingrained in me.
I have to say, that's how I know I'm not in New York City anymore.
Yeah. Because New York, they're like, when you say parish,
Right,
they don't know what a parish is. They're like, a county. I know what a county is. And so we would line up in the schoolyard, and the person that was in front of you had to be arm's length, girls on one side, boys on the other, according to grade and height. So it was like military school. And so they would give the announcements in the morning, and then we'd pray, and then we'd go to class. And then we'd sit down. And then when we go to recess, we would pray. And we come back, we would pray. And we go to lunch, we would pray. Right? And we'd tell our Hail Marys and all that. And then on Fridays, we'd go to Mass. And
you're bringing back flashbacks.
Yes. And we would go to Mass on Friday. And so most people are done like they didn't have to go to Mass on Sunday if you were whatever. But then I had to go to the Baptist church on the Sunday and then the Sunday school. So it was 6 days a week, pretty much. So that was ingrained in me. But throughout all of that, long story longer, a long story short, it's, once I grew up and I started to realize that I was gay, my sexuality, and I realized like how people had used the Bible verses to subjugate women, to enslave African Americans. Same thing with, any sort of minority or Native Americans, I should say, pardon me. So I started to really, my mind open up, and I started to think critically about the world and about life, and there were just certain things that not necessarily the Bible, but folks' interpretation of the Bible and the religious dogma that just didn't add up to me in a real world sense. And so the things that I was reading in the Bible didn't necessarily match how people were interpreting it. And I was like, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this and that was for a long time.
So what was the moment? Was it being fired, or was it before that? What was the moment that you sort of said, okay, I can deal with the conflicts of religion, and I'm going to now embrace being religious? What was the moment?
Well, when CNN will tell you, we didn't fire you, Don. We just didn't exercise your contract. No, but I mean, I'm like, but I'm not on the air. What does that mean? I'm still getting paid, by the way, but I'm not on the air. Yeah. So, but what does that mean? That means, they kind of feel like, no, you should not be saying that we fired you. We didn't fire you. We just exercised a clause in your contract, whatever. So what was it? Now, being fired, that wasn't, I started writing this book before that, long before that. I think it was like 2021 or 20. That was the original book I wanted to write was this book. But then when George Floyd happened, all of a sudden, my agent and the publishers would say, do you remember that book that you pitched to us 5 years ago that we told you wouldn't sell? Because those kinds of books don't sell. Can you write that now and do it immediately? I'm like, I told you guys that, because White Fragility and Isabel Wilkerson, what is it? Cast was selling. They were like hotcakes. And they're like, you had this. I said, I told you guys this 5 years ago, and that there was going to be a breaking point. And then anyway, but I wanted to write, I was about to write this book, and then I had to stop and write the other book. So when was the point? I think the point was, it was sort of after I came out to my mom, and I had a conversation with my mom.
How old were you?
I don't want to cry, because I don't have any tissue here.
How old were you?
I was 30. I didn't come out to my mom till I was 30.
Wow.
And then once I came out, it gave me a sense of autonomy that I didn't have, and when my mom accepted me and my parents accepted me and my siblings, then I was like, okay, I'm fine. And so
were you surprised?
Then I turned back to, I started going to church again. I started praying again in a way that was substantial and sustainable to me, because I realized that not everyone felt that way, that I was an abomination, and that, I wasn't a child or a product of God. And so that really helped me. So if you have anyone in your family who's gay or whatever, part of the LGBTQ plus community or whatever it is, look, even if you're uncomfortable with it, accept it, because I think their lives often depend on it. And I think not only their lives, their livelihood, their mental health, etc. So. Did you
feel, you describe this in your book, but some people here haven't read the book. You were surprised at your mother's reaction?
Yeah, because have you guys ever been afraid of something, like I really fear it, and then it happens and you're like, well, that wasn't so bad, right? You have nothing to fear but fear itself. So, yeah, look, the closest person to in the world to me was my mom, who had been a single mother and raised us. I had never wanted for anything. I'm not going to cry. Okay. So, and if she had said, I don't accept you, I reject you, or don't come around here no more, that would have crushed me.
Yeah.
Because, I had left home, I moved to New York. My journalism teacher told me, my professor at LSU told me I'd never make it as a journalist. I'm like, okay, why don't you do something more suitable to your skills? And I'm like, I'm a lot better than that person on camera, and my writing is a lot better than that person, and except, we just don't look alike. And so I said, you know what, I'm getting out of here. And so that's when I moved to New York. But so my mother was my foundation and is still, and my cornerstone. And so I can't imagine life without her, although I know, now, eventually, that is an eventuality for all of us, right? So, I don't want that to happen, and hopefully it's not for many, many years. But that would have crushed me if my mom and my sisters that I write about in the book,
right.
My first book, in this book I write a letter to my sister. I started with that. And, yeah, so that was that was really important to me. So that once that happened, then I was like, I don't really care. I don't give a shit what anybody else thinks about me. I'm going to go, I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to serve the God that I want to serve, and that was that.
Did you immediately start being much more open about religion?
Did I, after that?
After that moment?
I'm not one that wears my faith
No, I don't
on my
mean that,
sleeve.
but in terms of just conversation with.
Oh, absolutely. But listen, I'm not like some holy roller.
Right.
And I don't
No,
see,
no.
and I point out, as you see, the sort of contradictions in
Right.
religion, and,
Right.
you know, when people say, I'm part of a religion that was, you know, well, I don't say that, I just say, what if I told you I'm part of a community or a group that believed in human sacrifice or blood, you know, all those things, and I go through a litany of it, and at the end, and I say, and that group is Christianity.
Right.
Because if you read about all those things in the Bible, right, and you take them literally, like people take them as if they are, as if it's fact, when it is parables, right? It's mythology, and it's really lessons on how we should treat each other,
Right.
and how we should move in the world. We should be helpful. We should want to have an organization like USAID that helps from the richest country in the world to help people around the world. Mm-hmm. Since when has that become bad? All these people who say I'm a Christian and I'm a God-fearing and I love or whatever, but let's get rid of the organization that saves babies with HIV. It's like, what? That doesn't compute. Let's demonize immigrants. That doesn't compute to me. So
I'm going to use USAID to talk about Elon Musk. So you describe in the book, he reaches out to you.
yeah.
You're hesitant at first. So I'd love you to walk us through those conversations, like your hesitation.
This is where I'm going to be quiet for a little bit because I am in active litigation with Elon Musk and X.
Can you walk right up to the line?
No, I mean, there are certain things, as long as I don't really talk about it, but I write about it in the book, about what happened. Yes, and it's publicly, he reached out to me several times on his own platform saying, I want you to join the platform. And at first I said, no way, because I had gotten off of Twitter because, well, I still had the account, but I didn't use it. And I got someone to actually handle my social media because during the Trump era, it had become so toxic. I couldn't open up Twitter without someone calling me, I'm going to say the word, so don't be offended, without someone calling me a fag or a homo or a nigger or a coon or a spook or a race baiter or a libtard or I want you to die. I had death threats. And so I was like, I got to get off of this. But I need to be on it for what I do, so I hired someone to handle my social media. And so I'd gotten off of it, and I said, you know what, there's no way I'm going to go back and into that cesspool. And then after reaching out, and he said, I really wanted someone sort of to balance the platform, and I believe that Twitter, whether we like it or not, is a huge, important social media platform, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the world. And especially if you're a journalist, people get their information from there. When there's breaking news, people go to Twitter, like it or not. And so I said, okay, well, let's discuss this. And then I said to him and others, let's wait, because he hired Linda Yaccarino, who was a big deal at NBC, like their lead salesperson or whatever, a muckety-muck. And I said, let's wait. And the advice that I got from most people, even people who knew him personally, was to wait because their words, not mine, wait until there's an adult in the room. And so I did that, and once she came aboard, the conversations continued. I mean, they picked back up, and then I decided that okay, I'll do this, but I'll do this under the circumstances. The only circumstance that I'll do it is that if I have complete ownership, editorial control of what I say and what I post, and that Twitter or X had no control over it, and they agreed to it. And I said, this has to be, we have to have a contract, an agreement, otherwise I'm not going to do it. And so all of those things came to fruition, and so I said, what do I have to lose? People were really mad at me.
Right.
And then I think they realized after the interview that, oh, okay, he's not sold his soul.
Right. It's not a PR.
It's not a PR thing, that if I'm gonna be
You
on
ask
this
them, you ask them
platform,
hard questions.
that's what I do as a journalist. And as a journalist, I hold all people in power accountable without fear or favor. That's what we're there for. And if we're not doing it, then why even be a journalist? Right. And so that's what's so frustrating to me right now. I don't believe that that is happening. I think that people are afraid. And so that was the agreement. I did it. Unfortunately, he didn't like it. He canceled the contract, and here we are.
So do you have a view now, by the way, of social media?
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
if you go back and look at that interview from a year ago, everything in that interview has come to fruition.
Right.
Are you going to donate to a campaign? No, I don't know, maybe, but I doubt it. The first time he met Donald Trump, you know, and he's like, the president likes to talk a lot, but I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be a part of any campaign. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right. We talked about it. We talked about the Great Replacement Theory. We talked about, he said there was a slow white genocide in South Africa.
Right.
Now Donald Trump is offering South African farmers a fast track to come to the United States. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I would say everything in that interview was prescient. And I just thought, hey, you saw around the corner there. And so it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to work out, but in the end, for me, it worked out in the sense of truth and showing people what was to come.
So you have a, switching a little bit to DEI.
You asked about, what do I think of social media now?
Yeah, what's your view of it now? I went in, pushed my staff on social media, and just before I left, I told everybody,
get out.
Hell off.
Look, I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I'm also not an idiot, and I know where people are getting their information from. Our attention spans are really short. I just did a drop on the Don Lemon Show on YouTube, like and subscribe, on how we are seriously getting dumber. There's research. Research shows that we are getting dumber, our attention spans are shorter, and people are getting their information in snippets and bites, and because they want to move on and do other things. There's something else coming. And so I'm not like crazy about social media, but I understand that this is how many people are going to see the story. Hey, breaking news.
Right.
There's a scandal with the administration that they were on this app called Signal, which is an encrypted app, and they should not be on it, and they were giving away highly sensitive information. The vice president, the national security advisor, the defense secretary, all in hot water, including the director of national intelligence, and they might face some disciplinary action or step down or be fired. Details to come. And 2 million people will watch it on social media.
So
And how many people are watching cable news?
No, you're right.
Or even broadcast news?
But it's
hard. They're doing a little bit better.
Where I came around to was just, it was hard to understand who your audience was, and it was hard to maintain the discipline that I think journalism requires, and that's why I was anxious about it.
You're right about that. You have to be really, really...
That's why I stopped. I think I tweeted once in my life.
Yeah, but good for you. But as a journalist, I think that you've got to have some discipline, and you can't let what you're reading on social media and what you're posting affect your work and your journalism.
Yeah.
Just as when I now do my show on YouTube, I can see the audience. YouTube is every metric that you want. If you want to say how many black women are watching, there's a thing for analytics for that. And so I know who's watching the show, how many people, and I have to be really disciplined not to, when that number goes up, and not to just follow where the number is and just do what's really important.
Right. So let me ask you about DEI. You have a very complex, nuanced view of it. Of course, diversity is good, but I detected in reading a little bit of a hesitation about the form it's written. So I'm going to read a quote and let you amplify a little bit. To be clear, I'm not against DEI. I'm worried about the religious fervor behind it and the performative compliance it begets. Ironically, DEI has become a religion for some people, and as religions go, it's a ferociously puritanical one.
Yeah.
Just to talk a little bit about
Well,
it.
it's sort of what I said.
It's exactly
before.
what you said
What I said before is, my issue with it is that, and I think I went on to write about it, that same thing that where people, want to do the right thing. Right? And we should live in a diverse society. And I believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Don't get me wrong. But people use that diversity,
That's
equity,
clear
and
in the book,
inclusion,
by the way,
yeah,
not
to get rid of people like me and their strongest voices. Because then they can use it to say, well, he said something that we didn't like about this, and he said one thing that we didn't like about that. Or they can use it as a predicate to get rid of people. And so when it becomes a religion like that, you have to understand that the other side, the people who are your critics, your enemy, and your foes of diversity, equity, and inclusion, can use it to get rid of a Joy Reid, or a Melissa Harris Perry, or a Don Lemon, or anybody, or an Al Franken, or anyone like that. So I believe when it becomes sort of a religion, and people feel that they have to follow it to the letter, that is problematic in our society. And now, so you see the pendulum swung too far. And now it's swung the other way. I don't know if you guys have seen the new ads for the military and whether, you're not taking any diversity courses here. There's no diversity, equity, and inclusion in these parts. And we are real men. And you don't have to do any, I forget, classes and on sexism or whatever. Seriously. And so we've gone the other way because even with diversity, equity, and inclusion, what I believe in, you also have to remember that people are human beings. Right. And I remember when I had to do a diversity, equity, and inclusion class just because they had to figure out some way to say, oh my God, you said something bad, so we got to punish you in some way, so we're going to send you to I forget what, some sort of course, and sensitivity training or something. I'm like, okay, whatever, just do it.
Did you become more sensitive?
No, the sensitivity trainer ended up learning from me. Right. And so I swear, I'm not going to say to God, but on my life, I swear. So I would talk to the guy, he would call, we'd do like this Zoom thing, and he would say things, and he'd go, well, he said, why are you here? And I said, I don't know. And then I told him about my book that I wrote, This is the Fire, and he went and picked up a copy, and then the next thing he goes, why am I here? And he said, why are you here? And I said, I don't know. And then he said, okay, well, I'll try to cut this short. And he went back to management, and he goes, I don't know why this guy is here. And they're like, no, you got to keep him. He's got to do whatever. So, again, that's what they were doing in the book to get rid of me.
Right. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I have a lot more if you don't have any. So the Don Lemon who left CNN, based on the book, was depressed, as you say, lost?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I believe my entire life I've had a low-grade depression, and I kind of didn't realize it until an event happened to me when I was in Philadelphia. I got racially profiled in a store, and the police. I called the police because the security guard had assaulted me, and so I called the police, and the police showed up, and they went to the security guard. No, I got out of my car. And I went to go to the police, and they said, get back in the car. This gentleman called police. And I said, no, I called police. And they were like, wait, what happened? And then the guy started talking to me, and he looked at me, he said, are you Don Lemon? And I said, yes, I was an anchor and reporter at the Philadelphia station. And he said, oh, okay. And he went over to the guy, I could hear him, he goes, brother, you need to start looking for another job. And then I had the receipt in my pocket. I told him what happened, and I showed him the receipt, and he goes, oh, shit. And so, but it was very public. Right. Someone walked by, saw us, called the newspaper. It ended up in the paper. And to me, I was like, I had never been the story before. And so I started going to therapy after that. And then I realized I should have been in therapy all of my life. And she prescribed me Zoloft, and I was like, wow, this is a whole new world. And so since then, I have been a huge proponent of taking the stigma off of mental health If you have a mental health issue or problem, it's no different than, if you break your finger or whatever, you have to go to the doctor, go do it. And it's a whole new world. So I think that I had, had the cognitive ability.
But you were shaken.
I was shaken, and I realized that I was shaken so much that I did not want to go into that hole.
Right.
So I went into therapy. Well, I was already in therapy. And then my therapist asked me, he said, why don't you get antidepressants? Because I had gotten off of the antidepressants. And he said, why don't you go on antidepressants? I'm like, no, I don't need it. I'll be fine. And then finally, after a couple of rounds, he goes, you should go on an antidepressant. He goes, what happened to you is really, really big. Most people have issues with work or their home or whatever, and it's not in the New York Times. And I said, okay. And I said, I don't want to do it. And then he said, the Lord helps those who help themselves. And I was in the middle of writing, the end of writing that book, and I said, okay, you got me. And so I went, and so, I took my Wellbutrin before I got here, my bupropion, and so I went on it, and almost immediately, like, life was back. And for you older people, you know what Technicolor is. It's like in Technicolor.
Yeah.
The young people call it, I think, high definition. And I was like, I needed it.
Yeah.
So if you need to get on an antidepressant, whether it's an SSRI or whatever it is, I would say do it.
So questions from the audience? I can keep going, but let's
Oh my
take questions
gosh.
from you all.
It's been that. I promise this will be lightning round.
Do me a favor, if you have a question, come stand in the middle, because otherwise I'll have trouble finding people.
Hi. Hi, I have one quick comment about knowing about Trump in 2016. I knew from driving in Old Metairie in a neighborhood where people generally, they like bumper stickers and T-shirts that yell everything about themselves.
You
And
saw a
there
lot of
wasn't-
Trump signs and a lot of bump stickers.
There were no Trump signs. There were no signs at all. And I'm like, I know you guys are not voting for Hillary. So
What's
that
your-
was my first indication.
What's your question?
My question is, white supremacy is codified in the Constitution. In order for it to be like rooted out, we need a second constitutional convention that puts equality on the table rather than freedom, because freedom basically is on a sliding scale with white men getting most of it, and then it just kind of trickles down to the rest of us once they get that major share.
Yeah.
And I know the Republicans have been trying to do it for years in order to remove more rights, whereas the Democrats are not. And I'm not really on, I don't consider myself, I guess I would say pragmatic more than a Democrat.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out why that's not an option.
Well, because there's not enough interest, there are not enough people who are motivated to do that. I don't know if it'll be a constitutional convention, but I mean, look, it's no secret to say that the Constitution was written with a certain group of people in mind and not necessarily us. But there have been amendments to try to fix that, right? To try to, but I don't think enough has been done. Look, we have to. I don't know if it takes a constitutional convention, because I'm not that savvy about politics. I'm really not a political person. I'm not a political reporter. I just happen to be an anchor who had to cover what's in the zeitgeist. And when Donald Trump is in office, he takes over everything. He takes over politics, sports, entertainment, all of it. He's arts now. He's head of the Kennedy Center. And so you have to end up talking about him. But I think that we just need to come to a consensus similar to what Germany did and realize that there's a real stain on our country because of slavery and because of our history of Jim Crow, et cetera, and that we need to realize, whether it be through reparations or just an apology or some public acknowledgement of the wrong or all of the above. I write not in this book, but in the other book, that we have now was it in this book? That we have now the tools for
In this book.
reparations, that because of artificial intelligence. And there's a way to do it, because people say it'll never do it, you can never figure it out, but we can figure it out. So I don't know if it's a constitutional convention. I think it's more of a meeting of the minds.
And the reparations being from the government or from businesses that profited from slavery?
I think it can be through both, because people were discriminated against by the government and by businesses that profited, and in the end, the country profited the most.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Next person?
Hi.
I'm a Lemonhead.
Hi, Lemonhead. How are you? So let me just tell you. So the Don Lemon Show on YouTube, like and subscribe. So the group, we call it Lemon Nation, and the people who are there are lemon heads, and they came up with that name themselves. And so where's a sign? Someone has a lemon head sign here right now, and that shows you the power of independent media. Everywhere I go in the airport, they're like, I'm a lemon head, I'm in Lemon Nation. I'm like, thank you very much.
So I concur with you when you say the recent debacle regarding the security breach probably will be swept under the rug. I totally agree with that, concur. But let's say, just in case, what do you think it would take for any one of those people who participated in that security breach to get some type of repercussion or some type of penalty? What do you think it would take? If anybody.
Well, it would take I think it would probably go up to the Supreme Court, right? I think
Well, it would have to get, I'm not sure,
have to
I'm not
get-
sure somebody's
It'd
legal
have to be
standing
it'd
suit.
have to get into the court system, but really at the human citizen level, it takes people like you to be outraged enough to want to make change. We have to all be willing to sacrifice something, whether that's through protest. And I think that I do believe that protests matter. I know that people think in this moment they don't. I think when you see solidarity and you see people rising up, I think people become afraid of that, and it makes people aware that something's not right. And 2 years can go by really quickly, and the midterms, I think will help. But you've got to be motivated, because I don't believe that that Donald Trump won in so much as Democrats lost because of apathy, not messaging properly, and not being as good at politicking as the right.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last question, then I'm going to ask you to talk for a little bit about what you're doing now. Go ahead.
What's the beef with accountability?
What's the
beef with accountability?
What's the beef?
You started off the conversation with a discussion about leftist self-immolation. We got rid of Al Franken.
The echo is so bad in here, I'm sorry. Can you
Step back from the
Yeah,
mic.
you step
back.
or maybe you don't need a microphone. I want to make sure I hear it. Go ahead.
Really quickly, I just don't understand why in a society where there is so little accountability at the top, Signalgate right now, the best president of my lifetime directed no one to be prosecuted for the subprime mortgage crisis. When leftist when people on the left generally get together and see someone doing something wrong, there's oftentimes an outcry about that wrong. That's what happened to Al Franken. That's what happened to a lot of people. And I can understand us losing strong voice and that being a problem, but when people are doing bad things, some measure of justice should be enacted to right the wrong. So I'm sort of trying to understand where you were coming from on that, because there's so little accountability in our society, and it seems like you're arguing for less.
No, I think I like accountability. I'm not arguing for less accountability. It seems like I'm arguing for less accountability?
That's what
Is that
I
you're
thought I
saying?
heard earlier, so I'm asking.
You mean when I talked about Al Franken?
And others.
Well, I don't think Al Franken really did anything that wrong. He's a comedian. And he was joking around with someone, and there was no touching, no anything. It wasn't Harvey Weinstein level. I just think that Democrats overreacted to Al Franken. I don't think people overreacted to Harvey Weinstein. That's accountability. And I also think speaking of accountability, there's less accountability on the right than there is on the left. There's an over-accountability on the left and not enough accountability on the right. And so, if you look at the people who are now in positions of power in our government, most of them are not qualified to be in the positions that they're in, either through their resume or for actions that they have taken in the past, and there's no accountability.
Well, people of goodwill can disagree. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So for 2 seconds, since we're out of time, tell people what you're doing now.
So I am an independent journalist, and I'm very proud of it. I am going to continue to write, but I have my show on YouTube, which is the Don Lemon Show. I'm also live on Instagram, on TikTok, on every social platform. And the show, the audio version, which is a podcast version of the show, goes out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And so you can get me anywhere. You can reach out to me if you want to be on my show. You can come on. If you're, depending on your level of subscription, you actually get to be a guest on the show. We have the Lemon Legends on Monday, and the folks who are at that tier of membership, they get to be on the show just like any other guest or pundit that you see on cable news. And they get to challenge me just like that gentleman did, and anybody else in here. And we have real conversations rather than someone just sitting, in front of a camera in a studio somewhere with a lot of makeup and hairspray just preaching to you. And so sometimes we come to a consensus, and sometimes we agree to disagree, but it's all done in real time, and you get to be a part of it.
Great. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
You bet.